Ole Miss must avoid the Kentucky trap when it comes to South Carolina this weekend.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I am your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we will get to know the South Carolina Gamecocks with our friend and host of Locked On SEC, that podcast, Chris Gordy. We will look at some of the weirdness that's surrounding this game and give some players to watch on both sides of the field as Ole Miss looks to start their playoff march. We'll close it out as always with paths and picks in this ball game. And can the Rebels avoid the Kentucky trap? We'll find out all about it. All of this and more on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download that app today. Really interesting stuff. So we are going to learn about this game with the South Carolina Gamecocks. And Chris, one thing's interesting. With what South Carolina went through against Alabama last week, I am not expecting a peak South Carolina to come in. A dangerous South Carolina, maybe. I'm not expecting peak South Carolina.
Yeah, that's all about, where is this team right now? Sit at 3-5 in the conference, or 3-5 overall, 1-5 in the conference. Where's the motivation? I think a lot of us questioned that last week going into the Alabama game. Was where's their mindset at? Basically, at that time with 4 losses, knowing the season's over in terms of playoffs or winning the SEC and all that, but they had a chance at a monster, marquee victory for, Shane Beamer and company, and they were in position to pull it out, and they didn't. I mean, they were right. It was right there for the taking, and LaNorris Sellers with a massive lost fumble in the final minutes that gives Alabama basically a gift, but the prior weeks we'd seen South Carolina's offensive line did not play very well. They've been injured there. They've bagged up Case and Henry. All these guys have been out with injury, and yet they did a good job with that defensive front from Alabama, protecting LaNorris Sellers and giving him time. And so, again, motivation is a big thing. Massive letdown. Would have been a marquee upset. You let it slip out of your hands last week. Where are you mindset wise? That's the big question.
Yeah, and this game is always going to be about Ole Miss tackling LaNorris Sellers, because if you allow LaNorris Sellers to beat you with his legs, that is how South Carolina can win games. Because I do not think in a game this season they've had more than 350 yards of offense. But LaNorris Sellers against Missouri, for instance, he was very, very good that day. He just didn't have any help.
Yeah, the interesting part is, I think, as far as like total offense goes, South Carolina, they've not been where I think a lot of us thought they would be. I mean, it is the LaNorris Sellers show, and that's kind of it. Whereas, Ole Miss is a top 10 offense. And so, I think you look at it and say, if Ole Miss does their thing offensively, South Carolina's not going to be able to keep up. But what South Carolina does do is they take advantage of some things on special teams, and it's been a hallmark of Shane Beamer. We saw earlier this year Vakari Swain, big returns, and so fake punt here, a turnover there, maybe they can do something like that, and that's how they would stay in this game, because that's what I said last week. I mean, going to the Alabama South Carolina game, dissected all the numbers, going, I don't see any way South Carolina keeps this close, and yet it was close, and that was even with throwing a pick 6, on the opening drive against Alabama. So, the defense seems to be still giving a damn and still playing hard for South Carolina. And so to me, that would be the key to them being able to stay in this one. But yeah, you dissect the numbers and it's like, rushing offense, South Carolina ranks 120th. Ole Miss is 63rd against the run. So maybe that would be, you would go, maybe that's the recipe there, but you haven't run it all year while you're all of a sudden going to be able to run the football here. So, it's all the numbers are advantage of Ole Miss here. We talk about mindset for South Carolina. Don't forget about, mindset for Ole Miss and getting complacent. And we see this all year. Teams go, oh, we're set up perfectly here. This is very easy. We saw around this time last year when Ole Miss was, they're favorites at Florida. Florida's a mess. And then they let that game get away from them. So I think Lane, that's his job this week, is to, amid all the rumors of Lane's name being thrown all around and everything else, is keeping these guys focused to, hey, the job is not done. We have to go take care of business and win this game.
Yeah, the other night I had Dae'Quan Wright on the podcast, and he mentioned about this thing. The locker room is keenly aware of the opportunity that's in front of them. And he actually said, for the next 30 days, it's no days off. You cannot have a bad day for the next 30 days. Now, is that lip service? Is that a real thing? Is that just a segment of the team? Is that the whole team? I'm not 100% sure, but this Ole Miss team has to avoid the Kentucky trap at that point, the complacency, the game that you're a double-digit favor, that you should not lose the game, that somehow it just gets weird. And listen, this is going to sound really weird, but I think Ole Miss has an advantage this year as opposed to what they had with Jaxson Dart a year ago. And that is the fact that Trinidad Chambliss has gone through this multiple years. Now, it might have changed on the different level, but he's been on the playoff push. He has been in playoff type games. And Jaxson Dart, for better for worse, he's a first-round quarterback, was just trying to get Ole Miss there. They were trying to make it happen, do all that stuff. Chambliss is somebody that's done this before.
Yeah, and the other part of this too is Ole Miss gets a mulligan here. I mean, you can still, nobody wants to lose one, but you can lose one of these last four and still make the playoff at 10-2. So I think the preference though would be, don't let it be this one, because if you let it be this one, you're going to be, you're going to beat the Citadel, but Florida still has a lot of talent and they could sneak up on you. And then of course the Egg Bowl could get weird with Jeff Lebby's got a lot of talent on that roster, although they, it's a lot of close losses. They've been right there knocking on the door. They would love nothing more than to finish their season with an Egg Bowl win. So, yeah, again, I think that's what, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you at least have that in your back pocket going, we could let one slip away. I just think you don't want to let this one be the one that you let slip away. But, yeah, I mean, Chambliss has done everything and more to impress me. I mean, I said a couple weeks ago, I thought it was going to be a Cinderella story that he hits a wall and comes crashing back down when I saw those two road games at Georgia and at Oklahoma against two, Georgia, maybe not one of their most dominant defenses, but Oklahoma certainly was this year. And yet he had no trouble. I mean, maybe accuracy against Oklahoma through a lot of incomplete passes, but a lot of those he threw away. It was smart throws, throwing the ball away. But he's been great, man. He's been absolutely great all season long. And, he gives even more reason why, Austin Simmons, just keep waiting, man, because Trinidad's not giving this job up. And I know you had the silliness of putting him in at the goal line. And I think Lane in hindsight regrets that decision, because that thing could have been, look, you won by, what was it, against 8 against Oklahoma? Yeah. That should have been a 20-point win, if they capitalize.
Yeah, and also one more storyline for this game. This is the Realtree game, which means Ole Miss is going to be wearing these special Realtree helmets and the red jerseys. Not 100% sure about the pants, but it's going to be a good-looking game. I'm assuming South Carolina is going to do the Stormtrooper thing or something like that, right?
Probably. Yeah, this will be a good uniform game, I think, with both teams rocking their colors. But if anything, shouldn't that be reason enough for Ole Miss fans to come sell out this game? Lane calling out the fans, saying, "Hey, if you can't come see a 7-1 team, come on."
He's not calling out the fans. He's doing the same thing that Kirby did against Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. But the reality is, South Carolina sent back like 2,500 tickets, and so those are the tickets they're trying to sell. The game was a sellout ahead of time, but it's just wanting a raucous environment like Kirby did against Ole Miss a couple of weeks back. It's not complaining. At least it's not being taken that way here. But there's other groups of people that have interested focuses on this that read it a completely different way. I see that as well. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to get into some players to watch, and it might not be exactly who you expect. We're talking with Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. That's coming up next. Listen, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel. It's America's or the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even when you miss the start of the game or you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to a little bit of fourth quarter comeback magic. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot of an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you win that first $5 bet. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Also, do us a favor, like, subscribe, comment on this video, subscribe to the podcast on the audio podcatcher that you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. And Locked On is getting ready to change the game again, all in the name of having fun following your team. It's coming in December. We'll tell you more about it when we can. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. All right, so one thing that's interesting for me, Chris, whenever you look at this Ole Miss team going into South Carolina, the quarterbacks are always going to be the focal point of the offense, but I think this is a game where Kewan Lacy could break out. We talked about it on the squad show that's going to air a little bit later on this afternoon. I think Kewan Lacy has his star turn game against the South Carolina Gamecocks.
It's not a bad guess because, LSU, who doesn't run the football very well, broke off some runs against South Carolina a couple weeks ago. I think they did a pretty good job of handling Alabama last week and kind of stacking the box a little bit and making Ty Simpson throw the football on them because they trust that secondary. They like their DBs, and I think Fakari Swain has really come on here in recent weeks and is playing really well in that secondary. They even used him on a couple blitzes last week. He got a sack. Brandon Cisse has been very good. He's battled some injuries, and DQ Smith have been really good back there. But yeah, to me, that should probably be Ole Miss's, MO is they want to run the football and they want to control the line of scrimmage. And, Lacy has been very impressive, was top 5 rusher in the SEC right now, and don't see that slowing down anytime soon. So yeah, I would think the game plan is going to be a lot of run. We talk about Ole Miss and their lack of ability to slow down the run. I mean, you rank 63rd there, but South Carolina ranks 98th. I mean, they're giving up 162 on the ground per game. So that is certainly an area that Ole Miss should be focused on. And yeah, I think we come away with most likely 100-yard rushing day for Kewan Lacy.
Yeah, you look at it, Ole Miss and their run defense, everybody says, well, Ole Miss has trouble stopping the run, and that's not exactly true. Whenever you try and overly generalize, they didn't match up well with Arkansas, and they didn't match up well with Georgia, and those two schools took advantage of Ole Miss's defense. But against LSU had 50-something yards rushing. Against Oklahoma, they had that one explosive play, but after that, they were giving up 2.6 yards per carry. I like where Ole Miss sits with this run defense, and the reason I bring this up is the way to open up this offense for South Carolina would probably be a running game. It can't just be on LaNorris Sellers. You need to throw the deep balls to Nick Harbor and those guys to kind of loosen up the defense, because Pete Golding, for better or worse, whatever he wants to do, he has a little bit of that boa constrictor from his days at Alabama that's in his game plan. So if you can't stretch the field down the field, he's going to get closer and closer and closer to the lineup. And then you have 5 spies essentially on LaNorris Sellers. And if that happens, they're not going to be very successful.
Yeah, and that's my biggest problem with South Carolina is they still haven't found, I wish they had spent more money in the offseason in the portal at wide receiver. Like, I think there were so many good wide receivers out there to be had. I wish they would have gotten some kind of big playmaker to add to the bunch. They lost Josh Simon, their tight end last year, that came on for them so strong. But, Nick Harbor is, track star, track speed, and he can be that big play guy. Had a 54-yard touchdown catch last week against Alabama. But it's like, he does that, and then there's nothing else. You know what I mean? So it's like he's got the big play ability. There's just no consistency there. What you would like is more, 6 catches, 120 yards, something like that. And so, yeah, that's the biggest problem to me is, who are the pass catchers for LaNorris Sellers? Because we know what he can do with his legs, but he's got to be that true dual threat and be able to attack downfield. And I think Ole Miss has got the pieces in the secondary to be able to cover some of these guys. And, look, they went to Faison 4 times in the screen game last week. All them out to wide receiver a couple times. And Jordan Dingle, their tight end, it's just been kind of okay. So to me, I think Ole Miss has got the secondary to take away some of these weapons. And, will Nick Harbor get loose on one big play? Okay, fine. Just don't let him do it again, and Ole Miss is going to be just fine.
Yeah, and the weird thing is about this South Carolina team, I think the big difference between this year and last year's team, now, I understand that they lost a couple of NFL defensive linemen and that changed their defense. I get that. But the loss of Rocket Sanders, nobody seems to be talking about that. And the change of this defense with Rocket Sanders and after has been pronounced.
Yeah, and the offensive line protected a little bit better last year as well. But yeah, that was the big thing they had been missing for years prior. I mean, even when Spencer Rattler was there, they were trying to find who's that stud running back. And Faison coming over in the transfer portal in the offseason, I thought he had a chance to be that guy, but he's been okay. He's been largely underwhelming. I mean, with almost 300 yards rushing, but 4 yards a clip. But the problem is they fall behind in these games so quickly that they have to get away from the run. They can't just turn around and hand it off to the running back because clock's running and you're down double digits. So I get why they have to do it, but like I said, I've been more surprised why they haven't gone out or why they couldn't find who's going to be that next big wide receiver for them. Jacobs has been good for them this year, but that's about it. Between him and Harbor, those are their big pass catching weapons. And then you talk about last year when you had Rocket Sanders. I mentioned Josh Simon, Mazio Bennett, and a couple other guys they had in that second or in that wide receiver core. They're gone. So yeah, again, if they're going to do this, it's going to be, or if they're going to be in this game, it's going to be because Ole Miss is making mistakes, because Lane decides to go for it at 4th and 1 from his own 30 and doesn't get it. Things like that can open the door for South Carolina to hang around.
Yeah, and the one thing that was kind of exciting from that Oklahoma game, other than the fact that Lane finally got his ranked SEC win on the road against the Oklahoma Sooners, was the emergence of Princely Umanmielen and 7 quarterback hurries, a sack and a half, 2 tackles for loss. Honestly, a really similar stat line that Princely Umanmielen had the year before against the Oklahoma Sooners. I think Pete Golding is getting comfortable going up against mobile quarterbacks because they've done John Mateer. It's like a steady stream of the mobile guys starting with Taylor Green. I think they've finally gotten pretty comfortable about, hey, you're going to get loose a couple of times. That's fine, but we're not going to let it consistently happen.
And it starts with Perkins. I mean, he's done a really good job in coming up and getting stops and making big tackles for them. So, yeah, I think I agree with you. They've done a good job in that area, and they're going to be tested this week. That's the one thing for all the bad things LSU did this year. I thought they did a really good job 2 weeks ago of really making it a point they were not going to let LaNorris Sellers run on them. And it's funny, I think Cole Kublik put it out there. He ran something like, a couple hundred yards of actual running distance in the game, but only finished with 16 carries for 20 yards or something like that. It was like he ran so many yards around, but LSU did a good job of containing. I think that's what Ole Miss needs to worry about is, all right, if he gets outside, have people push him back in, and then you got somebody else coming and colliding. So as good as LaNorris Sellers is, he can't outrun 10 guys. So I think that's going to be the big word this week for Ole Miss is contain.
All right, so when we come back, we will talk to Chris all about paths to victory for both teams. We'll talk about score predictions as well. We might even get into a little bit of coaching search type stuff, so stick around for that. I do want to let you know that this show is brought to you by Mazda, and Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work to anything else, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings that same intention on how they craft every single model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every single detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count and possible, well, it becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Chris, listen, the way this path to victory for Ole Miss is play clean. If you don't have penalties, you don't turn the ball over, you just play a modicum of decent defense, you are going to probably win this game and cover the spread. I think that is the path for Ole Miss to win. I do think there's a path to winning ugly, but there's also a path to absolutely blowing out this game. And it comes from what we talked about earlier in South Carolina just being sleepy after the gut punch that they took in Williams-Brice Stadium last week.
Yeah, we mentioned Kewan Lacy rushing. I want to say the only with the Kentucky game is the only SEC game he's gone for over 100 yards rushing this year. So I think this is one you need to make it a point and say, path to victory. Lacy has 100 yards rushing. Trinidad continues to play smart. The key is interceptions. I think South Carolina's got 8 interceptions on the year, so 30th in college football. So watch that in terms of making mistakes. And then we just don't want to see any more of that lane being lane thing where you're going for it because you're hard-headed. Oh, it's 4th and 1. If we can't get a yard, yeah, but maybe don't do it deep in your own territory. Things like that. Watching Vakari Swain and the return game for South Carolina, it's been so dangerous. We've seen these last couple weeks, people still kicking it to Ryan Niblett for Texas and, Concepcion for A&M, who killed LSU last week. Like, gotta be careful. When there's a dynamic return man and you see it on film, take notes. Don't kick to that guy if you don't have to. So those are kind of the things that I think will lead Ole Miss to victory. And then, turning 3 points into 7. You don't want to be settling for field goals. You want to put points on the board, but you get into the second, third quarter and you're settling for field goals. It's just going to have South Carolina hanging around and people looking up at the scoreboard going, why is that game 23-20? So that's what you want to avoid. I think they won't do that. I think Ole Miss will come out focused, execute, put up some early touchdowns, and kind of, build that double-digit lead and kind of never look back.
Yeah, I think this is an important game that they front run in. They need to get up early by a touchdown or two to where they don't even have to worry about the pressure. They get through it. You have the Citadel next week, and then the last 2 games against Florida and Mississippi State. Though, what's the word? That is high leverage football games at the end of the season for you to accomplish every single one of your goals. Because as we talk about on this podcast, Chris, next year is here for Ole Miss, and all of the noise that's going around the outside, the next year part of it needs to be put out of your mind, because the next month, this is the number that you're going to remember, November, that you're going to remember basically forever.
Yeah, I talked about it, I think, at SEC Media Days. I kept looking at the Ole Miss schedule going, wait a minute. I was like, they got a chance here to do what last year's team couldn't do, and that's make the playoff. And I kept saying that over and over again. And I thought, I looked at the schedule. I thought they would lose that LSU game. I thought they'd lose to Georgia, and I thought they'd lose to Oklahoma. Those are the 3 losses I picked preseason. Well, when they beat LSU, I went, man, they really are. They put themselves in the driver's seat, because that win meant that much to the schedule and what this season could be. And so, yeah, it's kind of unfair to the guys like Jaxson Dart and Walter Nolan and guys that aren't on the team anymore that this could be the playoff run, but maybe they walked so this team could run. One other thing I'd love to see this weekend too is number 17. Get him the football. I mean, Winston Watkins emerging as a big-time playmaker. It's nothing against Harrison Wallace and all those other guys. Caden Lee, by the way, seems to come up with a clutch catch every week. Like, he makes a big play, and you go, that's why this guy's on this team. But Watkins is such a freak, so speedy. That guy, I mean, again, they're not dumb. Chambliss, keep getting Winston Watkins the ball, because, again, the other guys are drawing the attention. You want to cover Stribling, you want to cover Lee, you want to cover Wallace. Hey, there's Watkins wide open. So they got so many weapons, but I think Winston Watkins scratching the surface on what he's going to become down the road, super scary.
Yeah, and Dae'Quan Wright might be the best player on the offensive team for Ole Miss.
Most clutch. Like, every big third, fourth down grab that Ole Miss has needed this season, it's been number 8.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anyway, in this game, predictions for this game, what do you have and how do you see this game going?
Let's see. Scoring offense. So Ole Miss is averaging 37 points a game. That's 19th best in the country. And South Carolina is scoring 20. I think that's a perfect score to put this on, a 37-20 type game. You tell me what your average is, that's pretty much what you are. So I think, 17-point win for Ole Miss, 37-20. And unless Lane gets cocky and does stupid things, and then this thing's close.
Yeah, that's always on the table. That is always on the table. I'm going to go with 31-10. Just a little bit. I think if Ole Miss gets up by a couple of scores, you're going to see them take their foot off the gas just a little bit, and they might even try to rest Kewan Lacy and give Logan Diggs a few more carries and something like that. But I do think 31-10 is where I'm leading right now. Anyway, you can check out Locked On Gamecocks. I know Chris Marler and everything isn't here, but go to his website, get his coverage. I'm sure he's going to be giving some little bit of post-game information as well. Check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC as well. He does a fantastic job for the entire conference. Anyway, Chris, what do you have going on over the next couple of days that people need to know about?
Yeah, just talking all things about the conference. Obviously, coaching search, a lot of talk about LSU and where they're going to go. Of course, Lane's name keeps popping up in all these jobs. There's not going to be any decisions made anytime soon. So, it's all kind of fodder for the time being. It's fun to talk about. But, yeah, it's, hey, we got you covered. You like talking all things about the conference? Locked On SEC.
All right, Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Thank you very much, man.
All right, thanks, Stephen.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. You just saw Chris Gordy. He breaks down the best conference in all of college sports, from the rivalries to the championship to everything in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.